I am excited about this program. Katie and I grew up neighboring ranches in northwestern Partner, and we were cellmates, classmates for a number of years. I am proud of this lady. She went on to become a veterinarian and a doctor of veterinary medicine, and she came back from the Reno area a few years ago and took over the family ranch out outside of Freedom, Oklahoma, and has done amazing things there to improve things. And she brought in a beautiful line of cattle, and I could tell you stories about her, but she knows stories about me. So we're going to leave it at that, and I'm going to just introduce to you Dr. Katie Blunk.
Thank you, John. Don't believe everything that Johnny tells you. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me today to speak to you about something I'm very passionate about. I'm going to be sharing my perspectives today with you from both a rancher's perspective and a veterinarian's. And I'm going to be talking about how we've been surrounded by fires the last few years, basically of two kinds: wildfires on Mother Nature's wicked terms, and prescribed fires on our terms. I live about 40 miles northwest of Alva, and that's where we raise our Black Angus cattle. Our ranch has been located in the midst of the wildfires that have occurred over the last 3 years. And so far, we've managed to escape actually being burned on our ranch. We feel like it's not a matter of if, but when. So today I'd like to go over some factors with you about why Oklahoma keeps burning, plus some actions we're taking on our ranch to reduce the impact of future wildfires when they do hit. And I hope to stir in you folks here in the city limits of Alva some things that you might even want to consider. The slide of this cow, a newborn calf, amidst the devastation, has real symbolism of life after fire. I'm going to talk about how fire affects the land and the recovery that follows. I'll be discussing a lot about the benefits of fire, how our lands truly need fire to stay healthy. Again, emphasizing how we prefer to have the fire on our terms and not Mother Nature's terms. I'll be describing these 3 megafires that have occurred in our area in northwest Oklahoma over the past 3 years. Megafire being that one that is over 100,000 acres. And if that wasn't enough, look at all the little fires we've had just in the last 6 months to keep us tuned up and on our feet. This next map shows in the red square area primarily the location that the megafires have occurred in. But look at the little red dots scattered all throughout Oklahoma. This map is just from January 1st to April 15th. Oklahoma's on fire. It keeps burning. And there's a reason for that. Let's go back to the first megafire in 2016, the Anderson Creek Fire. This fire spanned Oklahoma and Kansas to the tune of almost 400,000 acres, and it became the record setter for the largest wildfire in the history of the states. Unfortunately, we lost 600 head of cattle in that fire. Not us, but the area. And, miles and miles of fencing. Luckily, no humans died that year. This map shows where our ranch is located. We're the pink star. We were about 1.5 miles on the west edge of the flank of this fire. We were driving home that afternoon on Highway 64 West, and just as we were crossing Anderson Creek, there was the fire, and we're going, wow, there's a fire. So we raced on home to get ready, and we called our neighbors to the bushes and said, looks like you're right in the line of the fire, and proceeded to get ready. We got our brush rig filled up, ready to go, roll out, and about that time a radio call comes over. Fire's headed straight for the Blunk Ranch, 1/4 mile southeast. I'm like, whoa. We pulled around the corner of the building, and this is what we saw. So you can imagine. So we kept rolling, though, and we were met with this wall of smoke. and flames, and that's where we stayed. We were blocked. We were unable to get on out. So we rode the west flank the rest of that night. This was a view the following morning, just from our side, and this is just a very small picture here of the impact of the fire. It had already reached Kansas at that point, and later the wind shifted that day and brought it towards you guys here in Alva, if you recall that. Lynn had a great aerial depiction of that. So why does Oklahoma keep burning? Well, we keep having these alternating wet, dry seasons, you know. Even after the wildfires, it takes a little bit of rain and boom, you get a scene like this. The fire is really good for the land in that regard, but Mother Nature hasn't been cooperating. She dries up on us in the winter, chokes us down, creates these huge, crispy, dry fuel loads that are set off at the slightest provocation. So, after the Anderson Creek fire, once again, we had a fairly wet summer, followed by that dry winter. And as usual, March rolls in like a lion, and you're all familiar with that, the winds of Oklahoma, running about 70 miles an hour. And that set the stage for the next perfect storm, the Northwest Oklahoma Complex fires. We now had a new record setter for the number of acres burned in Oklahoma and Kansas. What we thought was big the year before was now doubled, over 800,000 acres. This fire consisted basically of 3 wildfires burning simultaneously that stretched resources beyond capacity. Tragically, 6 people actually died in that fire that year. Some in the process of trying to save their cattle. So with 50-mile-an-hour winds, fire spreading so fast and furious, all you could do is get out of the way and pray for your neighbors. The 2017 fires affected 3 counties in Oklahoma and 3 counties in Kansas and a lot of communities. It spread catastrophe far and wide. The livestock impact was unsurmountable that year. Over 10,000 head of cattle died in those fires. Catastrophic losses. Wildfire does not care what's in her path when she's coming at you. So tragic. Lost a lot of wildlife in that fire too. Along with 6,000 hogs. I couldn't believe that hog farm burned up out there. So this is the footprint of the fires of the complex that year. And our ranch is in the blue box with the yellow star. So what I'm showing here is the Selman fire was primarily our major concern that first day, coming at us on point. And then the 283 fire started out further west around the burn. But before the afternoon was over, I was seeing smoke to the northwest and like, what's going on? And my friends from Ashland were calling me saying, we're burning up. We're burning up over here. As the days progressed and the fire went out, we were going, boy, we could sure use a break. A couple weeks went by, another fire starts south of us, and we were about almost in evacuation mode at that point on our ranch. Later that summer, we even had another set of fires in Kurt in July. I think you used some of my pictures from that where I brought my cows in. And it did scorch a corner for us of our ranch, but that's about as close as it came. This map right here does show where we sit now between 2 big bag of fires, 2016 and 17. How we've escaped being burned remains to be seen. So let's fast forward through another fairly moderate summer with rains, regrowth, followed by another 6 months of really dry weather. But just last month, 2018 of April, I look out on my patio, it's 100 degrees on April 12th, and look at that. That is not a cloud that you're looking at, that's smoke. And that's Jackass Ridge, that flat plateau up there, for those who's wondering about Jackass Ridge. So we loaded up and headed to the top of the hill, and this was our view to the south. Well, fortunately, it was further away than it appeared in the original picture. But we always start getting ready when we see fire like that and winds coming from the south.
That's the salt.
Yeah,
Cargo, right?
the white is the Salt Plains Flat, so that kind of gives you a perspective how far away that was. This was the 34 fire that we were originally looking at. So we figured we better get ready, as we do with all the fires when we see smoke in the area. So what's that mean? Well, that means a plan, having a plan, and this can apply to all of you. But for our plan, that means having very defensible space. And, you know, we do the typical things, hook up the water hoses, police the patio, put things away, close up the barn doors, get our weather radios out. We're doing, I don't have much, but I just throw a go bag with my essentials in my truck, so it's ready to go. And then we start working on the heavy equipment, filling up our brush wigs, our water tanks, hooking up the diffs to the tractor, make sure the bulldozer battery's not dead, you know, and the cow fire drill. We locate our animals and we know where they're at. We don't necessarily bring them in at the moment's notice anymore, but they're pretty well trained to that siren. And you can see right here, they were down that day on bare dirt. We brought them in and the smoke was looming over us. So let's talk a little bit about defensible space. Well, understanding fire behavior, we've tried to eliminate all the step-up fuels that we have around our house. And the arrows I've put in this picture point to our front yard. We burned our front yard. So we'd have a little black zone right around there. And that was really easy to do. You see, we don't have a lot of tall trees and the fire trucks can get all around us. Even those gyprock roads serve as a defensible barrier. So you might want to look around your house and see just how defensible it is. Can a fire truck get around it? What kind of fuel loads are right next to it? Do you have one of those canyons full of trees that back up to your house that's now invaded by the eastern red cedars? Those are fire bombs. This was the first fire we saw that day, the 34 complex fire. It started north of Woodward and was headed our way. And we kept seeing smoke to the south. Everything was going crazy. It's like, can that all be from that same fire? Well, no. Dewey County was on fire. Vice High, Leedy. We were getting texts from our friends down there that were affected. You know, the winds that day, they were relentless, just spreading fire like crazy. This is a video that I want to share with you, and I'm going to talk during this, but just watch for a little common theme here. Note the cedar trees and the size of them in comparison to the fire equipment that's trying to fight them. We no longer have the historic, frequent, and low-level prairie fires that took place a century ago by the Native Americans. You know, they used to light fire to the prairies to create rangelands for their wild game, flush out game, replenish their berry patches, or even create fields for their crops. And that dependable fire cycle that we used to maintain our prairies is gone. You know, with the arrival of the settler, the use of fire as a land management tool fell out of favor. Over the past century, the national policy has become suppress fire at all costs. Thank you, Smokey the Bear. I should have euthanized him when he first came on the scene. You know, that's led to a huge, huge increase in the wildfires that have developed over the last few years nationwide. But the cedar trees, as you can see in this, have taken over. They are native to our prairies, but without the proper management, they've just developed in epic proportions. They've taken over our forests. They've invaded our cross timber forests. They're present to a level of like 40% in the forests throughout the eastern part of the state. That's all those red dots that you kept seeing up there. And the firefighters, they can't even begin to get in front of something like this. You know, it's just about impossible. This was a big, big fire. It took out about 300,000 acres. and over 100 homes, and I understand 2 lives were lost, and last estimates, about 1,600 head of cattle. But this is my favorite topic, the eastern red cedar. Even the Bible speaks harsh against the cedar. Now pay attention, folks. This is Oklahoma's worst nightmare right here. And it can be right in your own backyard. So why does our state keep burning? Why does this keep happening? Well, the fire weather that we have with the high winds, the dry humidity, the high temperatures, that just sets the stage. The picture that I took was of our weather meter in our house the day the Ray and the 34 fires started. Can you believe it? It was 100 degrees with 1% humidity. That's what I left in Nevada, Oklahoma. And that's a recipe for disaster. And then we have the ongoing drought, which you're all aware of. For 6 months, we barely had an inch of rain out at our place. You lace that with a couple of ice storms. Well, they bring moisture, but they bring a lot of debris that winds up laying on the ground. It requires a lot of cleanup, and if you're not diligent about that, you've created another big step-up fuel. This map is a couple weeks old, but it's showing that we are still in exceptional drought. Even though I would say since these fires last month, we've probably had about 1.5 inches of rain at the ranch. So you take all these factors, you add eastern red cedar to the equation, and here you go. Whoa, that's Merlin, my mule, and he's up on Jackass Ridge looking out at that view of all those cedar trees, which, by the way, are on the neighbors. I'm not saying we're perfect, but you know, we've got a lot of, it used to look like that on the ranch, didn't it, Mom?
Yes.
So that is Jackass Ridge right there. And I promised Johnny Allen I wouldn't cuss today, but I'm going to tell you, cedar's a 4-letter word. So besides being a big old firebomb, these cedars are so volatile. You know, they're water hawks. They guzzle up 30 to 40 gallons of water a day. That's a precious commodity for us, you know, when we don't get any rain. And they've quadrupled in their population just in the last 2 decades. That equates to taking over about 700 to 800 acres of land in Oklahoma. It's lost to eastern red cedars every day. So with our current situation, I consider the invasion of this particular cedar tree to be the greatest threat to both our prairies and the rural-urban interfaces. Look around Alva, we've got a lot of those little canyons that back up to residential areas that are have become mini forests, you know, invaded by cedar trees. They used to be nice deciduous trees, but now the cedars are in there. This is just a fence line to show what unmanaged land next to managed land looks like in a very short period of time. The managed land is on our side of the fence. Does anybody here have allergies? Check this out. This crazy thing. Come on. The first time I saw this happen was in the canyon that's right by Mom's house. I almost called the fire department. I had to back up and look at it again. I thought those trees were on fire. That's pollen, folks. There's your pollen count right there. That's another reason to get rid of red cedars. So this brings me to my next topic. Good fires prevent bad ones. And what am I talking about there? I'm talking about prescribed burning. Applying fire to the land on our terms is much better than on Mother Nature's out-of-control wildfire terms. Prescribed fire helps the land in so many ways. Consider it to be like a preemptive strike to reduce the risk of wildfire impacts, because it eliminates years of buildup of dry fuels that have accumulated in a very safe and effective manner. And for us, we use it also to create a massive fire break effect around the perimeter of our ranch. These burn plans are very precisely executed and safe. Somebody might recognize this guy up there. That's Keith Butsy running the flank fire. This is our logo for our Burn Association in Freedom. We have a really great prescribed burn association right here in Woods County. We're a 501c3 organization full of experienced members that possess a great understanding of rangeland fire behavior and the skills to carry it out. We aren't just a bunch of cowboys out there lighting fires. We indeed are committing acts of conservation, not arson, contrary to what some people may think. So prescribed burning, it provides the best solution to the cedar, restores our prairies, helps lessen the impact of devastating wildfires. Prescribed burning is both an art and a science. It requires an understanding of topography, fuel loads, and weather. It's carried out with a written burn plan, which I have some handouts you all are welcome to take, but I'm not talking just on a little sticky note. It's several pages long and quite developed. We all have these when we do that and file them with our local fire departments ahead of time. We have to meet a proper prescription before we light a fire, and that means meeting the right wind, humidity, and the weather forecast, not only for that day, but for the days to follow down the road after the burns. Our association is 60 members strong, and these people, they really understand the behavior and benefits of applying fire, and we do it really well. This is a picture of a burn done in the background, and it seems so counterintuitive to so many people when they see smoke and they see us out there burning. But this is the most cost-effective and environmentally friendly tool to fight the cedar. Over 2.5 million acres are burned annually in Oklahoma by prescribed burn associations in a safe and effective manner with no wrecks. Prescribed burning is neighbors, helping neighbors. It's being good stewards of the land, pooling equipment, resources to safely execute a burn plan. I mean, these guys really are a well-oiled machine. Hey, and girls can do it too. Since I came here, I've been on every prescribed burn that we've had since 2012, since I've been involved with the association. And I've accrued a whole new education on rangeland fires. Our association does many successful burns every year. Even in the face, right after wildfires, we get back to burning once the burn bans are lifted. So, reducing wildfires. That's the big benefit for killing off those cedars. And we've seen water come back now in canyons and areas where the wildfires have gone through and taken out these massive cedar forests that are in the bottom of the canyons that we haven't seen in years. Water's running again. Fire, it makes the soil better. It makes for better grazing, both for the cattle and the wildlife. And then there's that nasty pollen thing again, to get rid of. Now check this out. This lady on the right, even though she's in the back seat, she's not a backseat driver. She's one of the original benefactors in getting our association on its feet. And it's a tough act to follow, let me tell you. After my dad died over 20 years ago, she took over the daunting task of war against cedars on the ranch out west of Alva that I now call my home, to make it come to its present state. She paved the way, taking it from a worthless, cedar-infested piece of land to awesomeness. That's my mother. So now, I'm going to show you some examples of how the range looks after prescribed burns on our property and the comparison how it looks shortly thereafter. This is a fire we did, also unprecedented, in the late month of August. It's considered a growing season burn. These are very safe, very smoky, very boring for the guys because they burn slow. But it was a great, great fire. Now, that was in August. This is the 1st of October. Now look at that green grass in October, folks. Now I'm going to show you this next view of the same pasture, and where I have the dotted lines is our fence line to the neighbors to the west, and those arrows point to the tall, gold, dry, crispy fuel, and all that woody species and cedars. This same pasture is the first one to green up this spring, even without the rains. It was greening up in March. Here's another example of a controlled burn on us. It looks like this awful after you burn and after a wildfire also. But look at this. A month later, cows spread out, uniformly grazing the land, loving it. And the weaning weights were up 80 pounds that fall. The cows don't lie. They tell us this works. So as I wrap up my talk here today, I want to address healing and recovery of the land and our communities. There's no question that the impacts of wildfire will likely linger for several years. And the hardship, the suffering, the losses, they must be handled with compassion to all who lie in the path of the wildfire. But this next slide I'm showing is a depiction of a photo taken every month of the exact same spot. This was the year of the Starbuck fire. The top left was right after the fire, moved to the right 1 month later. The one I want you to really look at is 2 months after the fire in May. We had a little bit of moisture. Now, this is the same fire that hit both sides of the fence. But notice the recovery on the right side. Doesn't that look a lot better? And you know why? That land had been previously burned by prescribed burning. The last picture is 6 months later, and that fuel was already 2 feet high. So wildfires have wreaked havoc in their path, but in reality, the good that has come from them is that basically we have applied 100 years of rangeland management to lands that haven't seen fire in decades. The lands will recover, and they'll be better. This is the Rhea fire, or the Ray fire, I want to call it Rhea, a month later, with a landscape that does portray hope for the future. Isn't that amazing? Forbs and other good grasses will return. In the wake of a fire, you'll have dead cedar carcasses. That's the thing that we're working on now, is dealing with those. But the grasses green up, and look at the water that comes back to the surface, where it's long been absent. So many of these plants are fire adapted, they come back with a vengeance. The Oklahoma state flower, it is fire adapted, as are many of the other wildflowers and forbs that we have. The wildlife habitats regenerate, and the grasses on our pastures are better than ever. This is the view from our patio, and we really love it, except for those pesky cedars growing out of the side of that red canyon that we just can't quite get to yet. We'll never end our fight to take them out. Retirement? The lazy part of KT? Well, I'd like to see that part. So as the sun sets on my talk, I want to show you 2 slides of the powerful symbolism of the devastation of wildfires and the kind of fires that can burn a quarter of our land in 2 minutes. This picture is called Up from the Ashes, and this was painted from my friends on the Gardner Ranch in Ashland. 6 months later, the same painting of the same cow. She's a surefire, a Gar surefire cow with a guard momentum calf by our side. This is maternal instinct at its finest, and these are the genetics that we have in our herd. This old gal, Surefire, gives us a wake-up call that we need to get back with momentum to managing our lambs with good prescribed fire, so we can avoid all the collateral damage that occurs with the out-of-control wildfires. Wildfire consumes everything in its path, but never takes away the hope, the heart of rural Americans when crisis hits their communities. And the recovery response was overwhelming. Time, efforts, labor, donations, hay, feed, calf replacer, medicines, veterinary care, you name it. This, folks, was rural America at its finest. My friend and veterinary colleague who was at the wildfire epicenter in Ashland, I'd like to share with you a little video of his perspective on the fire, and thank you as I end my talk. I'll get the volume up.
And when asked to say thank you seems so insignificant. There are people from neighbors, friends, people I don't know, obviously firemen, that did things that are kind of extra human through this situation. And my thank you will be a little different after saying that and not trying to name names, because I do not want to leave people out, and I know I can't name everybody because I don't know everybody that helped me personally or our community. But as a veterinarian, I want to say thank you to the producers, the stewards of this county, this state, this country, and commend them for their dedication, especially to the animals. We saw unprecedented response. These people and neighbors putting their animals in front of their homes, and that's a little hard to understand for most people, but unfortunately there was great death loss, there was great suffering with some of these animals, and these animals had to be dealt with in a timely manner that was fair to them, and that was very hard for us, and especially the people that not only had emotional but economic investments in those cattle. And to see them respond in a humane, ethical, timely manner was unbelievable. And that's a group of people that I would like to thank, and that's a thank you that probably seems a little strange to some people. But, and probably in closing, I'd like to thank God. He has turned this into opportunity. There hasn't been a day that I've woke up since the fire that we can't see Him glorified. And I thank Him for being a fair and just and loving God.
So if I could leave you with just one thought, it would be to buck the notion that all that comes from fire is destruction. Good can come from it in both restoring our prairies and the good in mankind. God bless all these people who help. And on that note, that's all, folks. Any questions?
What kind of numbers of acres do you do these controlled burns in? You said you started in 2012.
Actually, our burn association began in 2005. I arrived on the scene in 2012. They vary in size. The bigger the better for us. We figure if we're mobilized, we like to burn as many acres as possible. Typically, we'll have 20 people on site that day, everybody taking time off from their schedules. I would say one of the biggest fires that we did was about 2,000 acres. Probably the average ones are anywhere from 300 to 1,200.
Maybe a section.
You know, there's a lot of preparation that goes into it. The fire breaks being the biggest cost. The fire itself generally occurs in one day, and then there's mob.
It's unbelievable. Those guys get together, they roll out all of their machinery, they take their spots, and away they go.
Yeah, we have a lot of equipment. We're members of the Oklahoma Prescribed Burn Association that gives us the 501c3 status. So we've been able to receive through grants with the Noble Foundation and others a burn trailer that's equipped. Rosie subsidized a brush rig that we have that belongs to the association. We have 2 brush rigs and a 4-wheeler. But over the years, everybody's acquired a lot of their own equipment that they bring to the fire.
How's burn bans that are in effect affect your prescribed burns?
Okay, well, if it's a county burn ban, we are exempted. We have an agriculture exempt. We can continue to burn. However, those bans are usually in place for a reason, because it's really dry, and we're not going to burn if we don't have the proper subsoil moisture, and we don't want to not have our. It depends on if you need to use the land right away or not for grazing. You know, we don't want to burn up what we have standing there if we're not going to have rain. When there's a state burn ban, like there is now by the governor, that supersedes the county burns, we could go to state forestry and submit our burn plans to them, and they would have to sign off on it, and also be submitted to the fire chief, who'd sign off on it. But nobody's chosen to do that because it's not raining yet to our satisfaction to burn. But we're itching. We're itching to get back in the saddle, but you know, we want some more rain. We need more
Have you
rain.
done any mechanical clearing of your cedars out there?
Have we got any what?
Have you had anybody do mechanical?
Yes.
Boy,
we
have we.
What's that
Well,
cost?
Mom's been cutting cedars. She started cutting cedars out there in the mid-90s, and mechanically, and stacking, and then put a fire on it in the mid-2000s. But we've had track hoes come in, we've had mulchers, shredders, you know, track hoes coming in that just knock the trees down in the canyons that we can't get to. We have a bobcat that's probably running, you know, 3 out of 5 days a week going out snipping cedars. And mechanically even comes down to my hands, you know. We were filling up a water tank the other day, went down into an elm tree grove, and within 30 minutes we had cut probably 75 1- or 2-inch saplings that had grown back in on a pasture that we had just burned last spring.
Yeah,
It's just a never
it's never ending. It's never ending as long as you have. For example, here in town, we have ornamental cedar trees, but they're the red cedars. You look around houses and you see those red cedars. Well, guess where those seeds go? You go out
Yes.
in your backyard pasture.
Yeah, and the cedars that have the blue balls on them are the females, and the birds eat those, and then they go sit on fence lines. You see trees full of fence lines, and this grove of trees are sitting in the tree, and that's where they defecate, and the seeds sprout, and
Yeah.
back up they come.
Yeah, it's impossible to get rid of them.
But there's a lot of mechanical stuff that goes on. Burning is the cheapest way, but you still have to deal with the carcasses that are left standing, and we don't like those laying around our pasture because of flat tires and what they do to the udders and the feet of the livestock. We stuff. We cut and stuff. We're cutting and stuffing into the deep canyons, and someday we're going to have a roaster. Any other questions?
How do you choose which land is going to be prescribed burned?
Well, you know, everybody in the association has their own range management plans and their needs and know what they can and can't live without that particular season. It also depends on the time of year that we burn. If we burn early enough in the season, which is the riskiest time, I mean, the most wildfires occur in March. You know, we're trying to get a paradigm shift there where we're going into growing season burns that are much safer. But the regrowth, if you don't get the rain in the summer, isn't going to be probably enough to sustain the livestock if you're going to use that pasture. So if you can let the pasture set idle in your range management plan, then, burn. But that's kind of everybody's personal preference. We're doing it on somewhat of we've done our perimeters to the south and the west, which puts us in the highest target area for wildfires. And now we have a focal point in the center of the ranch that we want to take out that has 2 deep canyons full of cedars. I mean, we're by no means perfect, but we've got the cedars cleared out off of the plateaus and everywhere that you can drive through the pasture. It's the deep canyons that you can't really even do by a chainsaw, without.
What are the statistics, Katie, what it does for the gain, the cattle gain, and what it does for the grass?
Well, when you do a growing season burn, like in late May, June, July, the rebound of the protein level on the grass comes up into an 18% level, and it stays on that all through the winter as dry forage. That's a huge, huge difference than going into the winter with grass that's depleted down to like a 3 to 4% protein, as it would, and you get a double whammy on that. When it greens back up in the spring, you get that protein level again. But there's a lot of factors that you have to take into consideration. Rain. If you don't get the rain, then it has to sit and wait for that before it's usable again to regrow.
In other words, the cattle really gain after.
Yeah, the cattle, we can use this as a rotational tool on our ranch. The cattle follow the burns. The cows will be on a black burn area the day after if we would let them. It increases the palatability, I don't know what, but they go crazy and they will be on it. But we like to hold them off typically for a few weeks before we let them on it to allow the greens and the forbs to come back to about a 4 to 6 inch level. But they will go right back on it and start hoovering it. They're waiting. They'll wait on the fence line. There'll be cows standing on the edge of the burn when we're burning, going, "Hey, let us in there."
Thank you, Katie.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
it. Ladies and gentlemen.